Chapter 158, Muqing. The day passed in the blink of an eye. As the bright moon reappeared in the sky, the quiet sea gradually fell asleep. Starlight scattered the ground, covering the 7 Blood Eyes Bay with a mysterious veil. From afar, the 7 mountain peaks and the 7 blood-colored giant eyes at the top of the mountains looked like they were protecting as well as intimidating. What they protected was the prosperity of the 7 Blood Eyes, causing the commoners to yearn for it and be willing to come here. They would create their value here and provide a vast amount of residency fees, allowing the 7 Blood Eyes industries to continue earning profits. What they intimidated was the outside world, the non-human races, and those with ill intentions, telling them not to cross the line. As for the cruelty between their disciples, it was the same concept as nurturing Gu. They wanted to nurture wolves that could survive in chaotic times. Only such a wolf was worthy of truly joining the 7 Blood Eyes and enjoying the right to its benefits. By now, Xu Qing had a complete understanding of the rules of the 7 Blood Eyes. He looked at the harbor in front of him and lowered the speed of the swift boat, slowly entering the harbor. The magic boats of the 7 Blood Eyes disciples were floating on the sea. Beams of strong light from the lighthouse swept in all directions, causing the sparkling sea water under the moonlight to appear dazzling for an instant when the light passed by. This lasted until one of the lighthouse beams landed outside Port 79's harbor gate. It stopped for a moment on a swift boat that looked like it was about to fall apart. The light quickly gathered in front of Xu Qing, who was standing on the boat. The strong light was piercing. Xu Qing covered his eyes with his hand and took out his token. A gentle light emitted from the token, as though an invisible array had swept past it, confirming Xu Qing's identity. Very soon, a small gate slowly opened at the entrance of Port 79. The beam of light that was focused on Xu Qing also moved away, causing the world in front of Xu Qing to turn pitch black for a moment. However, it quickly returned to normal. As his swift boat entered the harbor through the small gate, a familiar wind blew over from the shore, blowing Xu Qing's hair. He looked at the harbor in front of him and heaved a sigh of relief. No matter how harsh and savage the environment in the 7 Blood Eyes main city was, it was still better compared to the sea. After all, here, the enemies he met among the Piedmont disciples wouldn't surpass his cultivation by a major realm. In back, Xu Qing mumbled and controlled the swift boat to head straight for his berth. His late-night return attracted the attention of some disciples from Port 79. If it was anyone else, they might have let it go after taking a glance. However, after noticing that it was Xu Qing, many disciples walked out of their magic boats and cupped their fists in goodwill. Xu Qing's previous breakthrough and the appearance of the forbidden sea dragon whale had made him very famous in Port 79. When these disciples who walked out of the magic boat swept their gazes across Xu Qing, they also noticed his broken swift boat. They knew that the other party had encountered great danger at sea. However, most of the Piedmont disciples knew their limits and understood that they shouldn't ask what should not be asked. Hence, they pretended not to see the damage to Xu Qing's swift boat. Facing the greetings of his fellow disciples, Xu Qing cupped his fist and returned the greeting. After his swift boat arrived at its berth, Xu Qing looked around and entered the cabin before starting his meditation. It was just like before he went out to sea. As he closed his eyes, Xu Qing's heart completely calmed down from the massacre earlier. However, his vigilance had already been engraved into his soul, especially now that he had returned with a heavy harvest. Although there was a high chance that with his current reputation, no one would dare to rob him, he still had to be vigilant. Xu Qing scattered even more poison powder around the berth, regardless of whether it was in the sea or on the shore. At the same time, Xu Qing didn't forget that he had killed the merfolk youth before he left. Moreover, the other party had Tao protectors. I wonder how the matter with that dead fish is now. Xu Qing fell silent. He didn't inquire about it and continued to cultivate warily. The night passed. The next morning, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The morning light seemed to have transformed into a graceful woman who walked over gently, scattering gentleness everywhere, calling all living beings to wake up and dispelling the coldness of the night from the world. As the light landed on the cabin, Xu Qing opened his eyes and walked out, staring at the port area. What greeted Xu Qing's eyes was the familiar world, the familiar light, the familiar figures, and everything familiar. Regardless of whether it was the patrolling disciples, the fellow disciples who woke up early, the commoners who were bustling about. or the fragrance of food, all of them made Xu Qing feel very good. He didn't care about the tattered Taoist robe on his body. He leapt off the swift boat and put it away. He first went to the breakfast shop he used to go to every day. Under the enthusiastic greeting of the shopkeeper, he ate a full meal. The shopkeeper didn't pay much attention to his somewhat tattered Taoist robe. After sweeping his gaze across it, he had seen such scenes many times. The familiar taste caused Xu Qing to eat double the amount he would normally eat. After he paid the bill, he didn't head to the homicide department to cancel his leave immediately. Instead, he went to the main city's disciple administration office, where he bought a new set of Taoist robes. After changing, Xu Qing thought about it and walked all the way to the location of Zhang San's transportation department. He felt that the swift boat could still be used after repairing it. As for the magic boat, he would have to refine it again. However, when he thought of his harvest, Xu Qing felt that it was not a problem to refine it again. Also, I took advantage of senior brother John last time. I have to make up for it this time. Xu Qing touched his pouch and quickly walked forward. Not long later, when the sun was high in the sky, Xu Qing saw the transportation department from afar. He also saw that other than the members of the transportation department, there were also some unfamiliar disciples. There were 7 to 8 of these disciples, and they were all women. All of them had graceful figures that even their Taoist robes couldn't conceal. They were curvy and graceful. Their appearances were equally beautiful, and they had a unique alchemy temperament that belonged to the second peak. They were all disciples of the second peak. At that moment, they were clustered around a core disciple. She wore a light orange Taoist robe and was especially eye-catching among the many disciples. Her appearance was the same. She looked exquisite, and her appearance was radiating. She was a peerless beauty. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Her features were clear and filled with charm. Her nature seemed to be very gentle. Although she was surrounded, she didn't emit the superiority of a core disciple. She stood there quietly and looked very elegant. Xu Qing's gaze swept over and he slowly walked closer. He then saw Zhang San surrounded by these second peak disciples. Compared to those extraordinary-looking second peak disciples, Zhang San, who was squatting on the sandbag and rubbing his hands, looked ordinary. His farmer-like appearance looked simple and ordinary. Zhang San saw Xu Qing's arrival immediately. He greeted Xu Qing and patted his chest at the second peak disciples beside him. "Don't worry, there's no problem this time. When I, old John, go out to sea, the various races will give me some face." Noticing that Zhang San seemed to be discussing business, Xu Qing didn't disturb him. Instead, he walked to a dark corner and waited silently. Xu Qing, who was wearing a gray Taoist robe, had a handsome appearance and a gentle expression. However, the darkness he was in formed a sharp contrast with the sunlight outside. Under the sunlight, they would see that the gentleness on Xu Qing's face was just a mask. Under that mask was an indifferent expression that had fused with the shadow. There was a hint of coldness that kept people away for thousands of miles. Added with his long hair and tall figure, it formed a unique aura. This attracted the attention of the second peak's disciples and most of them glanced at him. Xu Qing's expression was as calm as ever. He didn't care about these gazes and waited silently. Not long later, Zhang San finished talking to the second peak's disciples and arrived in front of Xu Qing. "Kid, you're finally back. How was your harvest on this trip?" "Not bad." Looking at Zhang San, Xu Qing smiled. "It's good as long as you gain something. Do you see those second peak disciples?" Zhang San had a smug expression on his face as he raised his chin at the group of second peak disciples who were about to leave. "Do you see the prettiest chick among them? That's the core disciple of the second peak, Muqing. I wonder how many people have dreamt of her as their Tao companion. Cough. It is my dream as well. They want to go out to sea to train. This is a big job. I competed with many of my fellow disciples at our port to obtain the qualifications to lead them out to sea. Even your captain could not win against me." Zhang San looked at Xu Qing expectantly, as though he wanted to see his envy. Xu Qing nodded. Zhang San was a little depressed. "I say, junior brother Xu Qing, shouldn't you congratulate me? Maybe after this, I'll have a Tao companion." Xu Qing thought about it and felt that what the other party said made sense. Hence, he squeezed out an envious expression and spoke seriously. "Congratulations." Zhang San was speechless and gave up on the thought of seeing envy from Xu Qing. Alright, it's hard for you to do that. You came here to inspect and repair the magic boat, right? Xu Qing retracted his expression and took out a piece of sea lizard skin of acceptable quality from his pouch. Senior brother Zhang, I did come to repair the boat, and I hope to use this sea lizard skin to make the refined magic boat stronger. Just as Xu Qing said this, he suddenly paused and lifted his head to look at the second peak's disciples not far away. These second peak disciples were originally about to leave, but at this moment, the second peak's heaven-chosen, Xu Muqing, whom Zhang Sen mentioned, noticed the sea lizard skin Xu Qing took out. Her footsteps paused and her eyes lit up. Fellow disciple, is the sea lizard skin in your hand of an 8th level check condensation sea lizard? Xu Muqing's voice had the unique immaturity of a young girl. It was delicate and graceful as it scattered under the sunlight, merging with the pill fragrance on her body. It was like a soft singing voice that made one feel good. However, when it entered Xu Qing's ears, he frowned slightly and instinctively kept the sea lizard skin. He then looked at Xu Muqing warily. At the same time, his heart was filled with vigilance. He also reminded himself that he couldn't carelessly take out the sea lizard skins. Just because he had gained a lot of them and they could be sold in the sex shops, he should have waited for the other party to leave before taking it out. Xu Muqing also sensed the change in Xu Qing's expression and hurriedly walked over to explain. I want to refine a pill and require a large number of sea lizard skins. The better the quality, the better. I've bought all the sea lizard skins in the city. This is also the reason why I'm making a trip to the sea this time, but I don't know if my harvest will be enough. So, if you have any left, I'm willing to buy them at a high price. After saying that, Xu Muqing looked at Xu Qing. Her clear and bright pupils, curved willow brows, and long eyelashes trembled slightly, emitting deep anticipation. Xu Qing fell silent. It wasn't impossible to sell it to the other party, but he first had to consider if he would have enough left to upgrade his magic boat. Zhang Sen, who was at the side, was stunned for a moment. He stood between the two of them and looked at Xu Qing, who was seriously thinking, then at Xu Muqing, who was staring fixedly at him. He suddenly felt that this trip to sea looked like it was not going to happen. In fact, he even got a faint feeling that he seemed to be an extra there. He coughed and was about to speak when Xu Muqing, who was staring at Xu Qing's face, suddenly thought of something and her eyes lit up again. I remember now, you're Xu Qing.